and welcome everybody to this is our inaugural one, isn't it? SalesTV USA.
First one.
Yeah, and very excited to be here. Very excited to be here today. And we're all hoping that this will become a weekly event. And we are hoping that we can make this a destination for people in the sales industry to talk about things that are apparent, things that have just come to light, issues that they have, a fun place for us to let our hair down and commiserate when we've had a bad day and also celebrate when we've had a good day. This is not a sales pitch. It will never be a sales pitch from any of us, nor any of the guests that come on. It will hopefully be a point of education and entertainment for one and all. So before we get into the meat of the debate and the conversations, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves. So, Alex.
Hello all, Alex Abbott and founder of Supero, B2B sales consultancy.
Rob.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, and we help startups scale.
Just quickly, it's only afternoon for people on the East Coast, isn't it, though?
This is true.
This is Rob. This is a US-centric mate. So you should go, good morning. Have you got your coffee? We would go tea, but we now have Americans response to English tea.
Absolutely. Andy.
Here to champion tea in America. Lecturer at Cranfield University on Sales Management, Leadership and Performance, and founder of the Institute of Sales Professionals.
Tim.
I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. I'm also known for one of my books, which is Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. And I'm drinking tea.
And you're known for a lot more than that, Tim, but we can't mention those cases until they've actually fallen out of the legal process. So,
Andy, allegedly.
Allegedly.
And I'm Adam Gray. I'm Tim's business partner at DLA Ignite and co-founder. And welcome to everybody in the audience. And looking across our profiles, I can see that we have got quite a few people watching. So do reach out and say hello in the comments. Obviously, four of us are based in the UK. Just one of us on this particular show is based in the US. But I think that there are some things that we're seeing that are in the sales industry that are trends that seem to be universal, because we talk to American companies in the same way that people from North America talk to European companies. We see an increasing trend that when companies and indeed the economy are running into headwinds, people batten down the hatches. So revenues are down. What we need to do is we need to guard our money as much as we possibly can. So we're going to try to reduce our costs. That, to me, makes perfect sense. However, reducing costs by cutting headcount for people in sales, people that are responsible for generating revenue, seems nothing short of madness, really. Cut consultants, cut product development, cut accountants, please, cut accountants, but don't cut salespeople, because when you're in the situation when revenues are down, how are you ever going to turn that around with fewer people? So we've all, in our sales roles, we've all interacted with organizations that have said, we're going to push this project back till next quarter, because next quarter things will be better, because we're really tight for cash at the moment and we're actually having to lay off some of our sales team. Not only do then the next quarter miss their number, they miss it by an increasing and ever increasing amount. So what do you guys think of that? Is that something that you're seeing?
Yeah. I think we're in, and I know this has been said before, but an unprecedented time. And so we went from COVID to big injection of cash to drive growth for businesses, and they were given a certain amount of time to turn that cash into revenue and profit, and it didn't happen. So I think one of the reasons it didn't happen is because so many people were hired And the biggest thing I think was missing was enabling those people, setting them up for success, providing them with the skills that they needed to drive growth for those organizations. And I'm not saying that would have averted the crisis that I feel like we're in right now, but certainly I think a larger number of organizations would have been able to grow or weather this storm that we're in.
Do you think, Alex, that was where people hired people and there was an expectation it was that the market was just going to go like this?
Yeah.
And you just hire people because you hire people because the market's going to go like that?
Yeah, and we'll make money for every head that we hire, and that clearly didn't happen.
Alex, when you were talking about not enabling people, it reminded me of the standard SOP for sales training. Stop me if you've heard this before, but I've walked into several organizations and it's been this. Hi, welcome to your first day. Why don't you sit with that person for an hour, listen to what they do, and then pick up a headset and start dialing?
Yeah.
That's training, isn't it?
Well, that is training.
That's onboarding.
That's onboarding, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful thing, baby.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a quite almost a perfect storm that we've kind of not even begun to appreciate yet. So I get everything that you're saying, Alex, and I think the context is there's this concept that you could always fire a salesperson quite easily. The red pen would come out because you could find another one. And we've talked about, I think the US, Rob, has got something like 750,000 open sales roles right now. The UK's got 100,000 open sales roles, and that equates to pretty much the drop in sales and marketing roles in the last year. So I think that common wisdom of addictive leadership of get the red pen out and let's get rid of people that we can rehire, because I might not find another accountant, probably don't want to find my HR person or that team, might trim them a little bit, has been that addictive leadership style. I think the other piece is that there's this big segment, and I spent some time in Amsterdam with HG Capital and a few of their clients, is there's a very different sales segment that's now come to the fore. We've kind of known it's coming, but we haven't seen how different it is in its way it deploys in the processes of it. And that's this SaaS software types, everything is a service base, where you are, as a salesperson, your ability to demo almost goes back to the days when we would take out big books and stuff and put things together on people's desks and go, this is how it works. And their ability to demo, their kind of that growth, which I think is worth like 7 trillion, if not more, has hoovered up a lot of young salespeople. And therefore, more classic businesses haven't been able to recruit because they're not there. And then this last piece of planet. So we did the European SalesTV call this morning, and somebody went, "There's 5 Ps, Andy, that you've mentioned. Product's pretty replicable, price is pretty replicable. Then we talked about processes and everything. People stand out. But actually, we're trying to recruit people who don't want to go into sales into an industry where actually we don't necessarily say that we look after the planet. So I think there's this massive storm that's now also exacerbated, to your point, Alex, by COVID and an uncertain world. And then, Europe's largest land war, which has sucked America into it. I mean, look at the political things that have happened this week around cluster bombs and things. And then massive inflation, which has meant there's no more cheap money for all of these VC SaaS people that we just talked about, which have hoovered up lots of people. So we're not going in a 10-year cycle of massive shock now. We're going in a year's cycle. Mm. And that's causing, I think, us, we've got to think over the horizon and figure out how we look at this and how we look at young people particularly and go, this is great. And if we don't fix this and organizations don't play their part, we're not going to drive the economy. We're not going to do international trade. We're not going to do all the things which sales is, but we don't call it sales because it's a dirty word.
But isn't that a fairly fundamental issue that has to be addressed? The older I get and the more experienced I get in business and in life, I recognize that without exception, sales is the most important function within any organization, because without it, everything else fails. You can do without an accountant for a degree of time. You can do without product development for a degree of time. You can do without market. But if you're not actually selling anything, if you're not generating any revenue, the organization ceases to exist. So why is sales so often thought of as an afterthought? Why do we?
And why is sales? I mean, we've talked in the European version of this, is that why, certainly in Europe, we're not seeing people at schools saying, I want to be a salesperson.
Absolutely.
I know the answer. Because sales is yucky. Sales is evil. If sales didn't screw up somewhere, we wouldn't need the rest of the departments.
Yeah.
Or so the theory goes.
And with the feedback that we get from SDRs is that it's a horrible job. Ringing people up.
The way it's executed now,
ringing people up every day and being told to go away. It's a horrible job.
Yeah. Well, Andy's touched on this, I think this morning, when salespeople are now expected to operate within a box, when in fact, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Andy, but salespeople the research has been done, and salespeople are found to be the most receptive, or have the aptitude for learning and self-directed learning.
Self-directed learning, yeah. We've got Dr. Dale Childs on and Matthew Nicola, who are GSSI, Global Sales Science Institute stalwarts. So yeah, it's a paper, and Dale, keep me honest here, Matt. It's written in 2007. It's part of my particular research, but basically says salespeople are researched to be the most capable of directing their own learning.
Yeah.
And how do you reward them for being most capable of directing their own learning?
You stop them from doing it.
Okay, right. That makes perfect sense.
You stop them from having any freedom at all.
Yes.
You must follow this cadence.
Yeah, so we don't want you to have
the
freedom.
playbook. Yeah.
Because we're all frightened, aren't we? And I'm here with Rob. Rob would be fascinated, but we don't want to enable the person. We want to enable the dollar, or the dollar. And therefore, if we have 200 salespeople, and let's face it, most American organizations in the Americas have many, many hundreds more. I mean, I used to work at EMC, now part of Dow. There must be 10,000 salespeople, in America alone in that organization. What if we actually gave them freedom to learn themselves? It'd be anarchy. Well, that's our perception. That's exactly it, isn't it? That's the fuse that goes. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
Because that would mean there's 2,000 or 10,000 different sales processes, 10,000 different systems, 10,000 different steps in the sales process, and that would be awful. But actually, if you gave people freedom within their framework and treated them as adults, they'd stay in there. They'd stay in the framework, but be a lot happier about driving their own development and learning.
Well, the kind of phrases I'm hearing more often today is revenue enablement, revenue ops. So you're basically saying that there's this new buzzword, and businesses are now reorganizing themselves around revenue operations and revenue enablement. Yet there's a risk it's going to take the organization in the wrong direction, because they're not focusing on the individual and equipping them to be better at their job, essentially, or more successful.
You know what, Alex? I'm not being but as you say that, I'm actually okay with the word revenue enablement, because at least it's honest.
Yeah.
It's about the dollar. I know we've never explored that, but I go, I'm all right with that. It's going to still have elements that I'm not all right with. Let's be honest, I'm a bit of a purist, but I don't like sales enablement because it doesn't help the seller. The revenue enablement, okay. Rob, you're going to say something, go on.
Well, I was just going to say that the history of the term sales enablement was really not enabling the verb to sell. It was enabling the noun, the sales department. And the the stretch that is revenue enablement is the recognition that it's not just the sales team that is bringing revenue to the organization. The belief behind that is any client-facing individual is part of driving revenue for the organization. And I would even take that one step further. Any individual within the organization is responsible for driving that revenue. I learned early on in my career started in customer service. And there was a rumor going around that they were going to lay off about 40% of our staff in customer service. And I panicked. And I said, well, wait a minute. You can't lay me off, because if you do that, who's going to take care of this situation in this scenario? And I started doing some back of the envelope math and said, well, this situation in this scenario comes up how many times? And it's the majority of my job. And what I'm doing is driving this revenue for the company. And I went to my boss and said, hey, instead of doing this, let's look at doing that instead. That was about 20 years ago. And to this day, they are still doing that instead and driving $3 million in additional revenue that they had never seen. Because as the individual, I took it upon myself to recognize that I don't care what job title you give me. My job is to keep the company afloat. My job is to drive revenue for the organization. So I too prefer the term revenue enablement, but it's twofold. It's because it's not just enabling the noun that is sales. It's enabling the verb that is to drive revenue. And that's everyone's responsibility.
Well, fantastic. Yeah. Sorry, Andy. Go.
No, I was going to say, what I wanted to do is that leads into customer centricity, though, doesn't it? And Dale, Matt, Chip, please put some. But customer centricity has been researched quite a lot by academics, and everybody loves it. I mean, there's a great cartoon, isn't there, where somebody's going to a senior executive walking into a room, going, I have the voice of the customer on the phone for you here, and he went, "Well, I'm way too busy. I'm going into a meeting about centricity." And the whole thing is like, hang on, to your point, Rob, everybody is responsible for it. But this is then back to enablement. So I did some work with a company very, very recently, £3 billion Swiss-owned company. Lovely. Their culture, their leadership, their style is stellar, and I'm not just saying it. They are brilliant. They care for their people way better than I've seen many organizations do it. But they introduced some processes that meant they lost customer centricity. And when we interviewed them, and when we surveyed them using literature scales, they knew it. They self-diagnosed and went, our processes don't let us do this. And we're not as customer intimate. And yeah, those things, those little humanities about, I'm a service engineer, so I go on site, but I don't necessarily have those three questions that I ask the people who I'm dealing with, going, well, what else have you got going on? And what other projects have you got coming down the line? And we get driven by task, because somebody goes, up the scale, I want to press a button and realize that everyone's done the task that I asked them to do today.
Yeah, we're a long way from moving from the ROI to the customer experience. I mean, companies talk about customer experience, but every conversation that I'm privy to is about, well, what's the ROI for that?
Yeah, I don't. You're fueling the fire. It's the end of the day, mate. I hate customer experience as another concept because it's just total bullshit. It's about customer relationship quality. And, everyone goes, I've got a net promoter score of 4.8%. And it's like, actually, what are you doing? What's a salesperson doing with the customer as a set of individuals? And how are they building that experience of all the emotions why we buy? We talked about it. Trust. 52% of why anyone buys anything is trust. Empathy. All of the emotion. How do you how do you engage an organization and all of its people and build those relationships? And you guys know it, because the first step is you three, Adam, Alex, Rob as well, Tim. The first thing is your personal shop window, your social profile. So you talk to me about how the hell do I even get a profile that makes somebody want to go, you know what? And Adam, you and I have had an attractive and appealing. Come on, you tell me. How does that happen now?
Product demo, mate. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Discovery call.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, it's part art and part science, really.
Yeah, but it is interesting, isn't it? That so often we talk about customer centricity, and we talk about putting the customer at the center of what we do, and we talk about it's all about building relationships with the customer, and we talk about customer journey mapping, and all of these things have nothing to do with the customer. They have everything to do with me selling. Yeah. So it's customer journey is not mapping the customer's buying journey, it's mapping my selling journey. I want to build a relationship with the customer. No, I don't. I want to build a commercial relationship with the customer. There's a big difference between the two. And actually, I think that part of the challenge here is that when we are too focused on the sale, on the closing bit, no one wants to be closed these days, as Grant said this morning on the call. Nobody wants to be closed these days. We have moved beyond that. People want to buy with confidence, and we need to think about how we can transition to that. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, sorry. I think there was a delay there, Adam. I thought you'd finished. I think there's a lot of sales leaders out there that understand that and are quite happy and no doubt, and I'm thinking of myself here, right? No doubt develop an approach that equips their sales team to adopt that more buyer-centric, buyer-focused approach. However, the organization doesn't give them the time for that to work. And so they run out of time, run out of runway, they're under pressure to forecast deals, and that ideal buyer-centric approach has to go out of the window. They either get fired or they have to change their approach because they didn't have enough time for it to work.
Oh yeah, my observation was not a criticism of salespeople; it was a criticism of sales processes, because these are exactly the same salespeople, or where the revenue engine of the organisation says we need to increase sales by 15%. So the way that we're going to achieve that is by cutting 15% of our sales force. Yeah. In what universe does that make any kind of logical sense at all?
And I'm agreeing with you. I think I'm appealing to the audience, because I do see that as a problem here.
So a headhunter friend of mine contacted me last October, and he always says that he sees downturns and recessions before other people do. Because what happens is that people start turning a tap off in terms of the recruitment. Now, coming out of COVID, he never had it so good in terms of the. There was we saw that we got some stats, which was there was 5 jobs for one person. So you could quite easily walk out of one job and walk into another, and move from job to job. And what he saw in October of last year was this. People gradually turning the tap off, and he was, putting out LinkedIn questionnaires about, are we in a recession or are we in a downturn? And here we are in July of 2023. So we're now, so kind of what happened was that people started turning the tap off in October. That we then started seeing all the layoffs taking place, and we are now reaping the rewards of the strategy that they put in place. At the beginning of the year, in terms of we're going to lay off 10, 15, 20% of the staff. And we're now in the situation, from what I understand from the LinkedIn figures, that there's now 5 people for one job.
That's a very significant.
So just say that again. It's 5. So if one job, 5 people.
Yeah.
But,
So, what you would call dirty statistics, or whatever you call it, which is basically just taking
I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to get it in my head.
Yeah. So the people that are saying on LinkedIn that they're active for work,
Yeah.
and then the jobs that are available on LinkedIn at the moment, there is, give or take, 5 people for one job, and that's taken since 12 months ago. It was 5 jobs for one person.
So I like the contention in it. I don't buy that, and the reason I don't buy it is the BBC ran something today which was, we're not out of inflation in the UK. Rob, apologies, it's my only data source because I've not looked in the US, but wages are increasing. So if wages are increasing, that kind of logic that LinkedIn's telling us and recruiters says can't be true, because if wages would be going down if that was true. And actually the data says in the UK, and that is not me picking an argument, it's on the BBC today. So I think that this is the problem that we've got. Back to sort of Alex's point, is the economists and all the dataists and everybody else haven't got an effing clue. And let's look at it. The UK was meant to be in massive recession. I mean, we were going to hell in a handbasket. We've not got into recession yet.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, and I don't know if anyone's ever seen Trevor Noah trying to make it lighthearted, but Trevor Noah, Rob? He was the anchor for one of the
Daily Show.
Yeah, the Daily Show. I love him. If you've never read Trevor Noah's book as a salesperson, you need to, because it looks about his life as a trader in the townships and how he would get a CD and he would trade up to something else. And he would trade up to something else. And then he'd trade up to a pair of Nikes. And then he looked at his life and went, this cannot be my life. And he got into DJing and then into comedy and everything else. And he's got this great sketch where he talks about American sports people, yeah? And I've spent years in America and I love it. It's a great place. Loads of academics that I know that are absolutely cracking. But let's be brutally honest in terms of looking at economists versus anybody else's capability. If you look at American sports, you watch a basketball match, they can tell you a left-handed shooter predictability to score in the fourth quarter of any game in October based on how old they are and their star sign, yeah? I mean, Rob, you have statistics about all of this across your sport up the yin-yang, which is great. But then if you ask an economist in America what's going to happen, they go, we don't know. The economy could go up or it could go down or it could stay flat. And it's like, great, I could have done that as a 5-year-old, yeah? And that's the problem. We put our faith in all of these genius economists and they know bugger all.
Yeah. Moneyball. It's still a punt at the end of the day.
Well, John Cleese, he talks about a friend of his that is at Cornell and did some research about people predicting markets. And this guy at Cornell deduced that if you take all of the predictions over the last 25 years that are done by experts and you compare them to just randomly choosing stuff, there is no difference in performance between the two.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point I make. You mentioned the word expert, and X is a has-been, and spurt is a drip under pressure. So
absolutely, but the point is that we none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. We only know what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
But some of these things that we're seeing behaviours that are so illogical, aren't they?
Mm.
You want salespeople to be the front end of the business. You want them to be as successful as possible. You want them to generate as much money as they possibly can. How do you get people to perform well? Well, you reward them well, you empower them, you make them happy, you give them all of these tools to be able to do it. And actually, we don't do any of that for salespeople. What we do is we batter them over the head and sack them when they don't achieve a number that is 20% more than it was last year that they didn't achieve.
Mm.
But the American is it Southwest Airlines, Rob, that basically the CEO caused a huge amount of consternation. But if we go back to it, he's probably right. But we don't do it in sales or commercial. And what he said is, my customers aren't the most important thing to me. And everyone went, what do you mean? He went, no, my people are the most important thing for me. And he turned around and he went, if an airline goes down, who the hell gets my customers off? It's my people. So if I treat my people really, really well, they'll give my customers a great experience. And that we've forgotten that. We don't treat our employees as if they're our most valued asset and they're our customers. And if you do, it has been statistically shown that your customers will feel more wonderful and give you more revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So why aren't these learnings fed back in terms of how organisations behave?
Well, they are now, aren't they? Because everyone's going to be watching this.
But apart
But
from
they
that,
don't know how. How do I treat them? Do we just stand around and sing Kumbaya? I mean, how do we do that? I don't know. So let me look to the old ways of doing it. What's that?
I said I kind of quite like that strategy.
What, singing Kumbaya?
Yeah, it's
They get his guitar off if he asks for a request, he does do requests.
yeah. As long as it's Kumbaya.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. Can you sing Far, Far Away?
Yeah, I can go a long way away, mate. Don't worry.
But I like Chris Capon's point on this, and I've known Chris for a good old 10 years, and he's a great sales leader. But he's right, it's about sales leadership, and we talked about it this morning on the Europe version. It's the authenticity and vulnerability of leadership that fundamentally will dictate whether people will follow you and want to work for you and be there. And taking a PISS out of myself, people who used to work for me only told me about 10 years in. It's like, Andy, we knew exactly what mood you were in. We knew exactly what you were like. And did you never notice that we actually would bring you a cup of tea at 9:30 in the morning, and as we left your office, we closed the door if you were in a shitty mood? And it's like, no, I didn't. But it's like, no, we knew how to handle you, but we knew you had up days and we knew you had down days, and that's okay. And it's that vulnerability of leadership, isn't it?
So what are the learnings for organisations then moving forward? Because what we know is that salespeople are the engine of the organisation. Salespeople provide the raw materials, the cash for organisations to go on their flights of fancy and develop new products and enter new markets. That salespeople need to be rewarded and made to feel positive and entertained because they're the most crucial single function. So this isn't generally reflected in how we see them being treated. So what should organizations start to do? How can we change? How can we turn the tide on this?
Yeah,
in my experience, it's go from static to fluid. And by that I mean, I joked earlier that it's part art and part science. I've come into organizations to build up sales enablement from scratch, and with many of the organizations, they had a very haphazard sales process. Everybody was doing their own thing, and their training was much as I alluded to. Just do what they're doing. You cannot scale if you don't have some formality, some framework. All of the salespeople need a solid foundation, an understanding of you, your product, your systems, your audience, and your message, and an understanding of how to convey all of that.
Yeah.
Then they need the room to grow. So that playbook that you start with, everyone treats that as, this is etched in stone. No, this is the foundation. But that last page of the playbook should be, now it's up to you to grow beyond this. And that page is always missing.
Yeah.
That is absolute wisdom.
Yeah. Bang on. I echo that, Rob. I think if all salespeople want all they want, there's a lot of things I think salespeople need, but if we were to super simplify it, understand the value proposition. Most companies are unable to articulate what their value proposition is.
Yeah.
And what that differentiating commercial value is that they deliver and how to quantify that. Salespeople want to win, and if they had that information and they understood how to teach potential customers how to extract value from their solution, I think that's, you're halfway there to giving them everything they want. Teamwork and feeling that sense of belonging, combined with a detailed understanding of what that path to value is, so that salespeople can then take it upon themselves to then explain that to their potential customers in order to win business and make those customers happy. But that's easier said than done, I think, and a lot of companies lose sight of that.
Actually, it's incredibly easy. I can teach you right now in 5 steps. I have a very fun exercise I've done with organizations when I'm doing the onboarding. I start by asking them to give me the elevator pitch. And 3 paragraphs, 3 pages later, okay, great. Couple of things here. Can you first and foremost take out the jargon? Because when I go home tonight and tell my mom about my first day at the new job, she's not going to understand half the words that you said. So go back to the drawing board and do that without the jargon. And they're able to do that. Great. Now, you're a bit verbose. Can you make this into the size of a tweet? Okay, and they go back, and that's really hard. Saying less is sometimes harder than saying more. Okay, great. You've done that. One last step. Can you stop starting with yourself and start with me, the customer, instead? Flip the script. And by the time they do that, they have an elevator pitch that is so powerful, so unique, so innovative. Their message gets listened to because the other 99 that they're competing against are stopped before that last step. Start with me, the customer, and you have my attention. Man, we have so much fun with that exercise.
Yeah.
But do you find that when you do that within an organization, that's sticky? Because one of the challenges is that we've always done it this way. That's always my, we train people how to develop a compelling personal brand is one of the many things that we do. And often people that have already got a reasonable personal brand are not a good starting place. And the reason they're not is that, well, I've got a great person. I don't need to do anything. And actually, often starting from a much lower baseline is incredibly powerful, simply because people are starting from a place where they haven't got any preconceptions. So is it sticky when you go through and you do this process and you create this compelling elevator pitch? Do people continue to use it after you've gone? And if they do,
great question.
Because one of the things that so Tim and I, in the early days of this company, we went to Chicago to deliver a training program for an organization, and one of the people that we were talking to had used LinkedIn to map all of the key stakeholders at various facilities that were within one of this person's key accounts that they were looking after.
It was GE, wasn't it, that they were looking after?
It wasn't, but we'll say it was for the time being. This guy said, right, I'm going to be coming to your region next week. I'd like to come and see you. And all the people said, yes, that's great. So he rocked up and he said, I'm your key account manager. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'd just like to have a chat, find out what's going on, feet on the ground and all of that. And all of these people had a lovely conversation with him. And then they said, while you're here, Andy, if you've got your order pad, I'd like to place an order. So he went to this one of his key accounts and he got, I think, a 200% uplift that very month. And then he went back to the office and he folded his arms and he said, check me out, I'm brilliant. What he didn't do was go and implement exactly the strategy that he had come up with on his other 10 accounts. He just did it to one account.
And the sales manager didn't implement the strategy on all the other salespeople's accounts.
Yeah.
That's the answer, though, Tim, to Adam's question. Did I find that it stuck? Two different scenarios. In the first scenario, when I was brought in and basically built the onboarding in a silo. Yeah, we want you to do all these great things, and we'll even watch it and delivered it and spot on, but then never to be heard from again. No, it didn't stick. In the other scenario, where it was incorporated by the sales leaders, and in particular, the frontline sales leadership, bought in, practiced it themselves, and coached to it, absolutely, it stuck. And we had the results to drive from that.
Is the answer basically to have leadership buy-in or something like that?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Without leadership buy-in, it was an exercise in futility.
But I think that point, Rob, is absolutely spot on. I mean, if you think about organizational culture and then the offshoot of psychological safety, most modern leaders have got no idea their responsibility in setting that culture. And you know, Chris is on here, and he does. Great example. We should get him on. And actually creating a psychologically safe environment is huge. And back to something that was said earlier on, you know, about putting all your people first. I know we've got a bent on salespeople, but putting all your people first. Because there's this comment from Sean Aker, great Harvard University professor. He's just released the Happiness Advantage, or released it a couple of years ago. And he rebalanced the world in the same way that astronomy was rebalanced in 1784, which was everybody thought that everything revolved around the Earth. And then one person pitched up and went, no, it doesn't. It revolves around the sun. Yeah, the Earth may revolve around the moon, but every planet that we can see right now revolves around the sun. And actually, we've been working and progressing that happiness is a consequence of success, and it isn't. Success becomes because you're happy. And somebody studied BT, British Telecom, for everyone in the US, and it was like they found that happier salespeople sold 13% more.
Go figure. That's it.
And it was like, but everyone then shits themselves and goes, well, happy people means we all run out and hug a tree, and we'll be giving them awards. Yeah, kumbaya. There we go. Back to the kumbaya moment. It's like, no.
Yeah, 63% of salespeople reported last year to be suffering with their mental health, and more than 70% are stressed.
Andy, it's interesting you picked up on the astronomy. I used to teach geometry to high school students, and one of the things I would tell them early on was, it was in the 18th century that we realized that the Earth revolves around the sun and not you.
Yeah, but hey, I mean, the great thing is looking back at that Austrian astronomer, it took 100 years for the rest of the world to accept his theory.
Yeah.
So we're talking about changing some stuff today. We'll be lucky if it takes us 100 days.
And some of them were put to death because of it. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, we will be as well, I'm sure. Not literally, but metaphorically.
Bring us home, Adam.
Because at the end of the day, we need to change the narrative. We need to change the structure. We need to change the operations of how sales happen. I know that we as a group are doing our bit to try to push this change through, to make salespeople happier, to make them more effective, to make them feel more valued, to make them to give them the recognition as being the engine that drives business growth. But it isn't going to be universally well received, because sales has traditionally been a role that people often slip into whilst they're waiting for the right job to come along. and it needs to be seen that it's not that. It is a crucial part of business and the most important part of every business. Anyway, we're at time. So thank you all on the panel. Thank you all in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for you watchers who didn't comment but were there nonetheless. So we'll be back at the same time next Tuesday, and we hope to see you then. And please, next time, bring your best questions and your best challenges, because we love a debate, and any insights that you have are always welcome. So until next week, thank you all very much indeed, and we'll see you then.